Just know you're not alone, 'cause I'm gonna make this place your home.
Welcome to Good News with your host, Angela Savage. For the next hour, Angela will guide you on the road to happiness while describing her own journey with the help of friends and family of her father, championship racer Swede Savage. Phone lines are open at 702-483-4444. Once again, that's 702-483-4444. Or you can stream us online at vegasallnetradio.com. And now, let's start on the path of happiness together. Here's your host, Angela Savage.
Good morning and welcome to Good News with Angela Savage on Vegas All Net Radio. Happy Monday. I hope you had a lovely holiday weekend. If you celebrate Easter, I know I sure did. Just really mellow. My mom came over and we just hung out with the kids. That was it. It was perfect. I'm so glad you're listening. Thanks for being with me here this morning. I have such a spectacular guest and I am so excited to get to chatting with him. But first, I just want to give another shout out like I did last week. I think I'm going to do that at the beginning of my shows now because over the last few years, people have sent me some really, really special things. And I've never been, honestly, and I'm sorry to say, I've never been terribly great at thank you notes. So I figured this would be a really fun way to give a thank you note on the air shout out. So I wanted to show you, I'm going to call my friend affectionately Miss Pammers. Miss Pammers, are you out there listening? Because I want to give you the cutest shout out. I have, those listening to the radio can't see it, but when you see the video, you will. I have in my hands a replica of the brick that my friend Miss Pammers had made for me and my dad. It's a memorial brick that they set in the cement at IMS. And then I also get a copy brick for my house at home. And it's got the Indianapolis emblem on it, Swede Savage, forever in our hearts, Savage Angel 42, of course, that's me. So having this cemented around the track is sort of cementing my dad and I together forever. So that is absolutely so wonderfully special to me. If you walk in the grounds and you're standing right in front of the pagoda, there's under the number 1, there's 2 trees. And now, not the first tree, but the second tree in the row that actually faces the pagoda under the number 1, you'll find my brick there. So make sure you stop by and leave respects for my daddy if you like. That would just mean a whole heck of a lot. Also, Miss Pammer knows that I'm a huge geologist, so she sends me lots of rocks and stuff. Here's a couple that she sent me over the weekend I want to share. It's malachite. It's one of my favorite rocks. So that's enough of that. Thanks again, Miss Pammers, for being a huge part of my life and one of my very best friends. Now let's get to my guest. Rich McDonald. Rich McDonald and I have a bond that neither of us would prefer to have. But it's great comfort knowing that at least there is someone in each of our lives who knows the exact feeling of losing a father in the most famous race in the world, a tragedy witnessed by millions of people. Our tragedies played out 9 years apart, but under nearly identical circumstances. In 1964, Rich's father, Dave McDonald, a handsome and talented race car driver from El Monte, California, was starting his very first Indianapolis 500. On the second lap, his car spun, exiting turn 4, and hit the inside wall at high speed, and then careened across the track into the path of another driver, the popular veteran Eddie Sachs. That collision and resulting explosion and fire claimed the lives of both Dave and Eddie. Dave was just 27 years old, and Rich was just the tender age of 6. 9 years later, my father, another good-looking and talented race car driver who grew up just 25 miles from Dave's hometown in San Bernardino, California, was starting his second Indianapolis 500. After leading a dozen laps early in the race, he also spun, exiting turn 4, and hit the same inside wall in virtually the same spot as Dave. The explosion and fire would ultimately claim my father's life 33 days later at the tender age of 26. I was in my mother's womb at the time and was born just 3 months later. Both of our mothers were at the race and personally experienced the tragedies as they unfolded. In recent years, both Rich and I have found different ways to turn the once tragic legacy of our fathers into a triumphant celebration of their lives and accomplishments. Thanks to the love and graciousness of thousands of fans who also suffered a sense of loss, the memories of our fathers is now one of love and celebration. Rich, thank you so much for being on my show today.
Good-looking, talented young racers indeed. Hey, Angela, great to be here with you. You know, I listen to this show all the time, and I've told you before that I'm just amazed at how quickly that you've acclimated to this. Unless you have this skill set, you know, in your background that enables you to do a show like this, it's real hard to acclimate yourself, and you've done it well, and you've ramped up quickly, and just really impressed. Great to be here.
Wow, that means so much to me, Dave. This definitely has been one of the scariest, most challenging things. We have a little fuzz. Do you hear that too, Dave?
My name is Rich, Angela, and
I'm
yes, I
sorry.
actually do hear that.
What's up with that?
Don't know. I'm on a landline. Let's just keep going and see
All right.
if it goes away.
Okay. I'm sorry I called you Dave. Sorry about the fuzzy too.
Hey,
But,
I take it as a compliment.
well, you should, because our dads were definitely the man. Let's see. You were 6 years old when you lost your father. What memories do you have of him?
Yeah, very young indeed. I was 6. My sister was 4, and you know, you would think you'd have some memories being 6 years old, but I really don't have too many memories of my dad back in the day. I've got a couple, and just not that many. But I do remember that we had a big lot. We lived in El Monte, California, and my grandfather actually had built 3 homes on this lot, and he, my grandmother, and my uncle, my dad's brother, lived in one of the homes. My aunt, which was my dad's sister, lived in another. And my father, my mother, my sister, and I lived in the front house early on, and then as we got older, we moved back to the back house. But 3 houses on this big, I want to say like a 3/4 acre lot, so it was big.
Wow.
And my father had built a little racetrack, of course, right, on the lot. So where you use the driveway as the front and back straight to go from, you know, the back of the lot to the front of the street and turn around on one of the front yards and come back. And he was a Corvette man during this day. So he lived and died Corvettes. He just loved to race Corvettes. And he made his bones in Corvettes back in the day. So he also got a little mini Corvette for me. And it was a little small-scale, gas-powered replica of a Corvette. He painted it blue and white, put the 00 on it. And I would run it up and down our little makeshift racetrack at the McDonald compound. And there were other kids in the neighborhood that also had little, you know, home-built go-karts. Nothing like what I had.
Right.
But little go-karts, and they'd bring them over to our track, and we'd race them. And I recall one day where I was going down the front street. I guess I had done something wrong. I don't recall, you know, at this point what it was, but I had done something wrong where my dad jumped out as I'm coming down the front straight in this little fast blue and white mini Corvette, and he jumped out on the track and he put his hand out for me to stop, apparently. But I didn't know what that meant, right? So I just swerved around him and kept going with my foot on the gas on the front straight. I'm in a race.
Yeah.
So I came back around, did the turn, came down the back straight, which was also the front straight, and he did it again, and I went around him again. And then the next time I came down, and I could just see it in his face, he was hopping mad. So I ended up pulling over. I never knew what I had done wrong, but apparently I did. Maybe I cut the guy off or the other kid off or something. But it's just little stuff like that that sticks in my mind, that I remember that you know, he tried to get me to stop, and I wanted no part of it. I just wanted to win the race. So
that's
that's
awesome.
one memory. I do remember also, I was probably about 6, so I think it was in 1963, where we were at Riverside, and my dad was practicing. I think the whole family was there. My sister might have been there as well. I know my mom was there. And he let me drive, quote-unquote, drive the Cobra down the back straight at Riverside. So I was on his lap, and he said, take the wheel. You're going to drive this. And I'm like all excited, like, are you kidding me? And he says, take the wheel. So he jumped on it, and I had my hands up on the steering wheel like it's a 10-2 location. You know, I didn't realize. I'm excited. I'm jacked up. We're going down a racetrack in a super loud, gravelly, rumbling race car, and I have my hands on the wheel. So of course you think you're driving, but you know, of course my dad had his hands down below, which I couldn't see.
Right.
But I just remember being so happy and so excited that I drove, quote unquote, a race car, Riverside, you know, doing like 150 miles an hour. I'm sure I told all my friends that I was driving, but clearly I wasn't. So, you know, I don't have many memories back in the day, but those are a couple of things that really do stand out.
Wow, that's really nice that you have those two memories, you know, even if it's just two. And it was your dad coaching you on the track. I love how you just totally ignored him because you wanted to win, right? You race to win. So
I think it was in him, and it was also in me. You know, you have other memories. Yeah, there's so many pictures of my dad back in the day, and plus me at racetracks that you see these photos and you think they're memories because you see yourself in like his Corvette standing there acting like you're driving, or you see yourself at the racetrack with your family. So you think they're memories, but they're really not. But it's good to have those photos because, you know you were there.
You were there.
You know you did things with your dad. So even though they're not true memories that I remember, they become memories in a sense, right? Because,
right.
You know, you see yourself with your family at the racetrack. So those are good as well.
Oh, that is so awesome. Now, you have a sister, Vicky, who is about a year younger than you. How did the loss of your father affect, you, her, and your mom as a family, as a unit?
You know, I think since we were so young, you know, like you said, I was 6 and she was 4, I don't think you really get it at the time. So I don't think, you know, speaking for myself and probably for my sister, I don't think the impact was so great at that point because we just didn't understand. For my mom, of course, that was an entirely different story. He was her life.
Yeah.
You know, and her life was altered and turned upside down, you know, on a dime. So the impact was great for her. I just don't think at the time it was so big for my sister and I, because you move forward. You know, my mom was a strong young lady, and she had a responsibility to move us forward, and she absolutely did that. So I think initially, you know, your dad's not there, but I don't really think you feel it until life starts to move forward. You start to get older. You know, he's not there for, speaking for myself, for my baseball games. He's not there for my football games. He doesn't come to the school functions, you know.
Weddings.
Had a stepdad later on, so he's there. But in the back of your mind, you know, it's not your father. And you start to miss these things because you see your friends all have this, and their dad's showing up at these functions. Yeah. At least early on, you know, she hadn't met anyone, my mom, at the time. So he wasn't there. She was there, and you start to gradually realize that your dad's not there and he's not coming back. So that's when it starts to gradually hit you, and it starts to affect you more, a little bit different, you know, from your situation.
Yeah.
But it started to impact me and my sister and I more as time went on, because you start to really realize, you get older, you're able to understand it more. You realize that he's not coming back.
Yeah. Yeah.
So initially not so much, but absolutely later on in life, it hits you hard.
I've always wondered, you know, my sister and I, she's passed now. She died when she was 28 from leukemia, and she was 8 years old when my dad died, and I always wondered, you know, what kind of impact it had on her as an 8-year-old. Now, see, you were 6, so it was probably pretty close to how you kind of felt about it. You don't really get it for a while, but then later it starts to sink in. But see, I never really had a chance to ask my sister those questions. So in a way, you kind of just answered a question I've had for a long time about that. So I really appreciate that.
Well, I think also you got to remember, when you're 4 and 6 and 8 and 10, you're progressing so quickly, right? I mean, you advance rapidly at that age. So I do think that there's a big difference between 6 and 8. So probably somewhat, you know, my answer applies to Shelley as well. But I think by 8, she was much more aware of the situation, you know, than I was at 6.
Yeah.
So probably partially answered it. But yeah, that's really sad that you weren't able to talk to her about it.
Right. Your mother Sherry and my mother Cheryl dealt with these nearly identical tragedies in very different ways. My mother remarried about 13 months after my father's death and brought 2 new baby boys into the marriage to go with my mom's 2 girls. But your mother never remarried, or did she eventually remarry?
Yeah, she did actually. Again, my father was her life, and so she was pretty distraught after that. But she eventually did remarry. She was a beautiful young woman, and all of her friends. Sherry is such a nice, attractive woman. Everyone had their little Prince Charming, their Mr. Wonderful that they wanted to set her up with. So, lots of people tried, and she did, go out with a few people. But she eventually did meet a man that she remarried. He became my stepfather. I think it was maybe in late '65 that they remarried. But he had that she remarried, and he had 2 kids that were just a bit younger than my sister and I. So we became like the instant Brady Bunch. I mean, we had her and him and 4 kids now. So I think maybe it was more like a marriage of convenience. She knew that we definitely needed a father figure in our life, and probably he felt the same way. So, they loved each other. It was a good marriage. It lasted maybe 12 or 13 years, and they ultimately divorced. But we had a great time while we were all together. But yeah, she actually did remarry in 1965.
Awesome. That's so interesting, because I thought that I really figured that they had handled it in such different ways. But to tell you the truth, it's very similar. We were the instant Brady Bunch kind of thing too. So see, we have a lot. We have so much in common, Rich. That's why you're my soul brother forever.
That's right.
Forever.
Hey, well, did you guys with the new family, was that in San Bernardino as well? Is that where you guys lived?
Yeah, well, I was born in Santa Ana, and then when my mom remarried, they bought a big house in San Bernardino. I think my mom wanted to go back to her hometown where all her friends and family were, and that's where Swede was from, so they went back to San Bernardino after that. And then I lived there till about 16, until I went on and moved to Laguna Beach.
Laguna Beach, the OC.
The OC, and I'm looking forward to going back down to the OC in a couple weeks for the USRRC Hall of Fame inductee party.
How cool is that? But, our stories, Angela, are remarkably similar. When you break it down from start to finish, they really are similar. And it's so great that both your father and mine now will be going into the USRRC Hall of Fame at the same time in the same class. So I'm definitely looking forward to seeing you again. I'm glad you finally decided to change your plans or whatever you had going to make an appearance down here. So I can't wait to see you.
This is something I have to admit I've been dreaming about since I was a little girl. I wanted to see my dad go in a Hall of Fame of some sort. I think he totally deserves it. So it's absolutely a dream come true. And then I get to come and hang out with you. And I can't wait to get to know Vicky and your mom. I'm so excited to meet your family. And then I'm going to go ahead and bring my own date. I'm bringing John Martin, who was part of the 1973 and many others Indy 500. He finished 7th that year. So I'm really excited. I think he should be there too. I think it's going to be a great time. We're going to get some great pictures, and what an honor. I mean, I'm blown away that I get to go and stand in for my dad as a Savage, and I just want to make him proud.
Well, both are very deserving, and I don't know if you had a chance to look at the class, but it is a spectacular class that's going into the Hall of Fame. So I'm honored as well. I know that Swede absolutely deserves to be in this Hall of Fame and others. My father was just recently inducted into the Corvette Hall of Fame, and we went out to the Corvette Museum in Kentucky for that induction ceremony, and it's just... And you're going to find out, is this the first Hall of Fame that Swede has been voted into?
As far as I know.
Yeah, well, you are going to feel a sense of overwhelming pride, and I can't wait to watch you feel that, because that's what we felt at the Corvette Hall of Fame. And to have him go into this one is also very, very rewarding, and you're going to feel that sense of pride. And I'm glad that we're going to be able to be there to experience that with you.
I can't wait. We're gonna blow the roof off the room. It's gonna be so much.
April 9th.
Yeah, it's gonna be so much excitement. Dave was starting to make some decent money as a race car driver prior to his death. Did your mother have to go to work immediately after his death to support the family, or did she at least have some time to mourn and not have to worry about the money part?
Yeah, she was actually working when he was killed. So she wasn't working early on when they were married. My father was actually, he got his career start in drag racing. So from 1956 until 1960, or to the end of 1959, he was a drag racer.
That's rad. I
So
didn't know.
he was also a mechanic, and he, like I said, he was a Corvette guy. So we went from one Corvette dealership to another, working as a mechanic during this time. So when he went to drag races, it was primarily local in the local area, Irwindale, and other drag strips and areas. So he really didn't have to travel much. He was making good money as a mechanic at the dealership he worked at. So my mom wasn't working at that time, but at the end of 1959, he decided that he wanted to move into road racing. He found a sponsor at another Chevrolet dealership who was willing to sponsor him, pay for his expenses to go racing, plus give him money for every race, and then a portion of the winnings, but he would have to move over and be a mechanic at this dealership. It was a little bit of a cut and pay, but everything else that he was going to get, provided he won, would make up for that. Mm-hmm. But he didn't know at this point. He didn't know he was going to be a winning race car driver, so he was basically taking a cut and pay to pursue his dream. So he asked my mom if she'd be willing to go back to work, and she said, of course, during this time while he ramped up pay, hopefully,
yeah, right,
to get his income back up, and she did. So she ended up taking a temporary 2-week typing job that turned into a 42-year career in the grocery industry. But at the time, she did take that temporary job, and she was working when he died.
I'm really curious. Did that bother her at all that she wasn't at the race when it happened, or was she almost a little relieved? Or can you help me with that? Was she bummed she wasn't there?
At Indy?
Yeah.
No, she was there.
Oh, she was there during the race. That's right.
Yeah, she was there.
Yeah.
She had, he was just traveling all over the country. His career had really, really skyrocketed. So he started off running Corvettes and winning just about every race that he was in. And then Shelby, it's a funny story too, because Shelby actually offered him the job in late 1962. And you would think, look, Shelby just had invented this brand new super fast race car, the Cobra. And my dad was running Corvettes at the time, and actually the first ever showdown, the first time the Cobra ran, Billy Krause was the driver for Carroll, and my dad ran the first ever Corvette Stingray. So it was the first race for the Corvette Stingray. It was a brand new 1963 Stingray. The car had done a tremendous transformation from an older body style to the new, sleek, super fast, super cool looking Stingray, and he ran that. He had actually the first one that ever came off the line. Chevrolet gave to him to race in this race. So It was the first ever showdown between Chevrolet's Stingray and Ford's Cobra, and it was at Riverside in October of 1962. My dad jumped out to a huge lead. He was on lap 4. I think it was a Le Mans style start. So they sprinted at the gun, right? They sprinted to their cars.
I love that.
Hopped in their cars. And my dad, since he was a great drag racer, had these shifting skill abilities, and he took off. And we've got tons of pictures where he was the entire back straight ahead of the second place driver. He got off to a really good start, but his coil wire popped out, so he had to pull over. He popped the hood. Luckily, he didn't know what it was at the time, but he saw exactly what it was. The coil wire had popped. He put it back on, hopped in the car, jumped back out in the track, and Billy was on his tail. So they had this hour and a half showdown, nose to tail, Cobra versus Stingray race. Eventually, the Cobra was so much lighter It was a little bit quicker. Billy was ahead of my father when they both, oddly enough, they both lost a rear wheel. This is back in the day where it was just different back then. So you think, how do you lose a wheel? But they both lost a wheel. They both retired. But after that, Carol offered my dad a drive to run the Cobras. And you would think that anyone would immediately jump at this offer, but he didn't. He struggled with it initially because he was such a Corvette guy, and he was loyal to the Corvette camp. But the offer from Carol was so good; it was going to be able to take care of his family much better than he was, with this little sponsorship for each Corvette race. So he ultimately did take it.
That is just so cool. I need to take a quick break, if you don't mind, to shout out my sponsors. Can you hold on just for 1 second?
Indeed.
Thank you. I want to say I have a new sponsor that I'm absolutely proud of, Pegasus Marketing Group, and Ralph Hansen has come on board to help Good News with Angela Savage stay on the air, and I'm so appreciative of that. Also, Miles Ahead Motoring School at IMS is supporting Good News with Angela Savage, and I'm going to play some commercials for them right now. We'll be right back.
Welcome back. Let's get back on the path to happiness. Once again, here's Angela Savage.
Good morning. Good Monday morning. Welcome back to Good News with Angela Savage on Vegas Allnet Radio. I am talking to my soul brother, Rich McDonald. He's right here. Are you still here, Rich?
I'm still here. Hey, I wanted to get back and actually finish my thought on your last question as to whether my mom actually, had time to mourn, or did she have to go right back to work to make the money. We were fortunate enough that since my dad, towards the very end of his career, was starting to win some big races with some big purses, so money was definitely rolling in. Substantial amounts of money was rolling in, actually, to the family. So she didn't have to go back to work right away. Of course, the company she worked for at the time agreed to give her all the time she needed to mourn, of course, and just come back when you're ready. But, we had a life insurance policy that paid my mom a lot of money. USAC also, United States Auto Club, with the circuit that sponsors Indy, also pays, apparently, the family if a driver suffers a loss there at the track. So she had a big check that came from USAC. So she had these things. She had plenty of money. We were lucky that people set up a memorial fund for my sister and I, and there were several hundred people that across the nation that donated to this. So she didn't have to use, fortunately, any of that memorial fund money to live on. She was able to save it for my sister and I, and it helped put my sister through college. I was a college dropout, so it helped me a little bit. I ended up actually, when I was 18, buying a brand new 1978 Camaro with my college fund money. But, we were fortunate that we had that money as a family rolling in. She actually even bought a brand new home with some of that money in 1965. So she did not have to go back to work immediately. She had plenty of time to mourn, which we're very thankful for, and her employer was really gracious to do that for her.
Wow, big shout-outs for her employer. How wonderful that they were so considerate. That's just really nice. Rich, do you recall what you were doing the day your dad died?
Yeah, well, I was actually at the race. Not at the race, but I was at the sports arena watching the race. I was there with my grandfather and my uncle, so it was just us three. It was the first year that Indy had ever broadcast the race across the country on a closed circuit broadcast. So there were, I think, 63 venues across the country at venues that showed the race. The LA Sports Arena was one, and we were there. So I specifically and distinctly remember exactly where I was. We were in the seats, watching it up on the big screen. We saw the big, huge crash, smoke and fire everywhere. It was weird because you got to remember this was 1964, so there were no graphics, there were no high-tech visuals up on the screen, but there was confusion, and minutes had gone by, and the entire auditorium, I specifically recall, was just quiet. And then they put up these little crude cutouts of race cars. They look like little Formula One cars, just little graphics up there.
Yeah.
And they put the numbers of the cars on the graphics.
That crashed.
And I don't really think that I understood that my dad's was 83, but as soon as the graphics went up there with the numbers, my grandfather just grabbed myself and my uncle, and he says, "Come on, we got to go." So we walked out into the lobby, and I remember my grandfather being on the phone. I don't know who he was talking to, but you could tell, at this point I knew it was serious. He hastily grabbed us and took us out to the lobby, and he was on the phone. I was with my uncle. I don't really recall what we were talking about, but I can just see that my grandfather on the phone wasn't happy. So after a couple of phone calls, maybe 10 or 15 minutes there at the phone banks that were at the auditorium, we left. So I saw it happen. It was live, but it was on broadcast TV at the LA Sports Arena. So absolutely, I clearly remember where I was, and I saw it happen.
Wow. God bless you, Rich. I just can't imagine what that would be like for a 6-year-old boy to have to see that. I just can't even imagine. And I look how great you've turned out. What an awesome human you are, and such good, strong character, and running around representing your dad like a boss. And I have so much respect for you.
How much do I owe you for that comment?
You owe me a big old hug in about 2 weeks at the Hall of Fame.
Look at Angela. I mean, that's what I say. I think our lives are so similar. I mean, we basically got out of racing, my family, for the longest time. You guys as well. I mean, my mom, he was everything to her, and she was very distraught once he died. And everyone, all of her friends, like I said, we lived in a small town in El Monte. He was the guy who did well. So he was kind of the personal champion, the hero of the area. So when he died, people for weeks continued to come over to the house, and they wanted to wish my mom well, and it was too much for her. She didn't want to relive this 45 times a day, so she eventually moved us away, and that's when I just mentioned she bought that home in Covina, and she moved us about 30 miles from El Monte, really nice area in Covina, and we started our life. And, I grew up, I knew who my father was, but I didn't really have any aspirations oddly enough, to be a race car driver. And this is why my mom didn't push me away from racing, but she didn't encourage it, that's for sure. So I started to live a normal life out here in Covina. I mean, I played baseball, I played football. After high school, I played tennis. So I basically lived a normal kid's life, playing normal sports, as opposed to having that thirst-quenching desire to be a race car driver. So, we were out of racing just like you for a long time, and I only recently, with my mom, began to get back in to the racing community and going to events with my mother. And, thankfully the racing community, which is a tight-knit circle, have welcomed us with open arms. And, I just can't tell you how gracious people have been to now that we're going to these racing-related events. But, our families and our paths to this point are very similar.
Yeah, and it is true that, the racing community, how welcoming they've been to myself as well. You always hear that the racing community is the best community and we're all family and everyone takes care of each other and all the stuff. But when you actually feel it, especially like for me and you, 40 years later, maybe, and it's still strong and you're still part of the family, it sort of makes it not worth it, but it sure takes a lot of the sting out, doesn't it?
It does. And, Angela, you have a story that people can really get behind. It's sad that what my sister and I went through, but, look at your story. It's just a great story. Someone should make a freaking movie out of your story. I mean, your mom was 6 months pregnant. You never got to know your dad. I'll bet. I'll absolutely bet there were times, because I did this to my daughter when she was in my wife's womb. I'll bet your dad talked to you, while you were in there. But you never, by the time you got out, of course, your father was killed at Indy. And it's just a sad, tragic story that it's the underdog story, and people love to get behind it. So, I've got a story as well, and it's kind of sad that my dad died when I was so young, and we have definitely moved forward and gotten past it, and we've grown. But your story is just like no other, Angela, and, a lot of people really, I think, pull for you.
That's so nice.
That's that.
You know what you said about my dad visiting me in the womb, right? Is that what you meant? Like he,
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Talking to you.
Oh, I've always believed that, and it's just something that I don't always share because I don't know how abstract that sounds or how weird it sounds. But I in the bottom of my heart, believe he came to me in the womb, and we chatted it out, and I told him that I could handle it, and I would take care of Shelly and my mom, and it's just not something that I share with everybody, and I don't know how they would think about it. But the fact that you just said that, and opened it up so that I can say that's just really, really something special. Rich, thank you so much. I mean, I know he came to me in the womb and said, "Oh my gosh, we have a situation. Are you going to be able to handle this?" And I'm sure I told him I would, or something like that. I don't know what it would have been, but I know it came and worked it out with me, so that I wouldn't be, bitter, even though I was for a really long time. But I'm working through all that now, as you know. I'm done with the mourning part. I'm tired of crying, all that stuff. Now I just want to show off his accomplishments, and be kind of an ambassador for the sport. Even if our daddies died, we still love racing, and we always will.
Absolutely, and you've done that. I mean, recently you have come so far so fast, and just look at how you're representing your father these days, and you should be commended. And you that he is extremely proud of you, smiling down, and you're doing a great job. And it took you a while. It took me a while.
Yeah.
I mean, the first event that I went to that was racing related was 2012.
Whoa.
What is it, 2016 right now? So there was a whole span of decades that I knew who my father was. I was proud. I used to brag,
Yeah.
as odd as it sounds, I would brag to my friends in grade school, basically, that my father was killed in the Indianapolis 500, because
Yeah.
I knew that anyone that knew anything about racing knew that if your father was racing a driver in the Indy 500, he had to be one of the world's best drivers.
Amen.
So I would, it sounds funny, but I would brag to them. I would tell them, basically, that
I did too.
my father was killed in the Indianapolis 500, but really what I was doing was bragging that, he was one of the world's best drivers. So, I knew who he was. I was proud of who he was and his accomplishments and his contributions to the racing community and racing history. But I really, I don't even think I went to that many races for those 30 years. But we eventually, my mom and I, started to get back into racing-related events and going to these Shelby employee reunions. And, like I said earlier, when we found out that they just welcomed us with open arms, and I think what it is, Angela, they're happy to see me, Dave McDonald's son, whatever, but I think when they see my mom, it brings back memories of my dad, because my mom went to a lot of these races, and she was with him back in the day. So when guys like Parnelli and Gurney and Bondurant and Peter Brock, when they see my mom,
Your mom,
these memories just keep flood into their minds, and so they come over and we start to reminisce. And whereas maybe for the past 30 years these guys really haven't thought much about my dad, right? He died over 50 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
So these events nowadays, these car events, these old school historic cars have become so valuable that the guys who own them, who have more money than they know what to do with, they all want to have these guys who used to drive the cars back in the day. They want these drivers to be with their new toy at these events, right? So they fly them all over the world to be at these events, and then oftentimes get up and speak about the car. And whereas before Gurney and Brock and Bondurant, they wouldn't really talk about my dad because they're so busy reliving their life at these events.
Right.
But after seeing my mom and I now at these events, we'll go to racing-related functions now, and these guys and Alan Grant, they'll get up and speak, and they'll mention my father.
Yeah.
So I think I directly attribute that to my mom and I now going to these events, and people look at us, especially her, and they remember, like, man, Davey McDonald, I remember him. I remember he did this. I remember wow, that's right, Davey was a hell of a race driver.
Davey. That's cute.
So they'll mention him, which is the point I was trying to make now. And it warms my heart now to hear these great, legendary race car drivers talk about my dad in such a great way and mention him and his accomplishments.
Well, nobody really wanted to talk about Swede for a while either because it was so dramatic. So, we're bringing these awesome people back to life, in a way, or at least making sure...
We're their voice.
We're their voice.
You're your dad's voice, and I'm my dad's voice.
I am Savage. Hear me roar.
And you do roar.
And I do. I can't help it. I'm born that way. The publishing of Art Garner's recent book, Black Noon, was revealed to many people for the first time what a talented driver your father really was prior to the Indy in 1964. How did the book project get started?
Well, you're right. Like in regards to my father's racing talent, I mean, he was extremely talented. And I think, it was a different time back in the 50s and 60s where, there was no social media, there was no internet, not many races were even broadcast on TV, right? So I think your local community, wherever it may be across the USA, I think they were primarily focused, and they heard about and they read about in the newspapers the local races. So when you look at like the Indy and the surrounding area, mostly sprint car races in that area, right? My dad didn't race sprint cars, so when they would pick up, residents would pick up the newspaper and read about racing, they didn't read about Dave McDonald. It was just such a different time. People over here on the West Coast, I mean, everyone knew about my father over here on the left coast because he was, it's a sports car community.
Because we're West Side. West Side.
It was car crazy California, right?
Yeah.
It was hot rodders, and sports cars was the big thing out here, and he was winning a lot of big races. So people out here knew about him, but I don't necessarily think that it translated his talents and his accomplishments translated to the rest of the country. I mean, Shelby did run races, Shelby American ran races around the country, but again, it wasn't like you could see in an hour across social media, find out who ran in that race and who won that race. So it was an entirely different time. But, the drivers knew who my dad was, for sure. I mean, even, I think, 30 or 40% of the Indy field in 64 my father had run against. And he'd raced against these guys in races, whether it was NASCAR or sports car, and he'd beat these guys. I mean, there was Voigt, Unser, who else was in there? Roger Ward, Jimmy Clark, Gurney was in that 64 race, Lloyd Ruby, Walt Hangson, Parnelli. He raced against and beat all of these guys. So I think the drivers knew how talented he was, but I just don't think the Indy community or the Indy riders knew who was coming to race. I mean, a rookie is a rookie, but he was extremely talented. And I think that's been realized nowadays. I think, like you said, Black Noon, which is a fantastic book, by the way, I think that has gone a long way to inform everyone outside of the West Coast, inform the world, basically, how good of a driver my father was. So, in regards to that, I don't think everyone really realized how good he was at the time. But the book came about. Art Garner, who was the author, I think he was either online on social media one day, maybe Facebook. I only recently joined Facebook. So it was either he was on Facebook or he was on an online racing forum where he saw my uncle, my dad's brother, post something. So I guess he'd always had a desire. He was always fascinated, Art was, about the 1964 Indianapolis 500. It was the only time in history to that point that the Indy 500 had been stopped for anything other, red flag for anything other than weather.
Yeah.
So he'd always been fascinated. He worked for Toyota for decades. He was a big race fan. He was fascinated by the events of the 1964 race, and I guess he'd never written anything in his life. The guy's incredibly talented, which surprises me that
He is.
this book was written so well. But I guess he had the urge to write about it, so he contacted Doug, which was my uncle, to feel him out and try to get some information. And Doug directed him to me as, kind of like a gatekeeper to my mom and run his ideas behind me. Talked to Art on the phone. Seemed like a really nice guy, so I set up the meeting between him, my mother, and myself, and we all got together at my mother's house. Art is just a genuinely wonderful guy. We've had lots of people, Angela, in the past that have come to us wanting to write about the 64 Indy 500, but either we just didn't feel right about the author, he was just out for a quick buck, we didn't think that he was going to do the story right, and we've just always passed. But there was just something about Art after meeting him that we felt good about. So, and when he was at my mom's house, my mom, Angela, saved everything that was related to my father in his racing career from back in the day. She has 17 3-inch binders with photographs, newspaper clippings, magazine articles, official documents, contracts with Shelby and with Bill Stropp for NASCAR. So she saved all this, and of course everything related to Indy as well. So when Art saw these books and he started to thumb through them, and there were tribute letters from just people you can't even imagine that wrote to my mom after my father's death, he realized that, this would make his job a lot easier because he'd done a lot of research for the book and he was going to do more research, but there was a hell of a lot of research that was right there in her books that was going to help him.
Almost a turnkey assignment. She had done her homework so well. Right?
Yeah, and she had put it was all just in boxes. She didn't touch it, by the way, for about 30 years. And I think it was in the late 90s that she decided to go ahead and start to put all this stuff together and make sense of it all. So luckily she had done that. So by the time Art, came over, it was easy reading for him. But he has said that it was that day, that meeting, after meeting essentially and speaking with my mom, who gave him her blessing, that he decided that day that he was going to write the book and tell the story. And I think a lot of it had to do with what he saw in her books, that he knew there was a lot of information that he can put into the book and not make it just a story about a tragic event, but make it a story about two people, basically, which was Eddie Sachs and my father, and their families, and what led up to that fateful day in 1964. Not just write about the race. I mean, been there, done that. A lot of people have touched on that, but write about the history and what made up the drivers. And not just the drivers, but every driver, and not just my father and Eddie, but every driver that was in that race. So I think he did a tremendous job. I think it is by far the definitive account of that 1964 Indy 500. The book has won several awards, so it's getting high acclaim.
That's just wonderful. I wanted to tell you, yesterday I felt like I should go watch the crash as part of my study for the show today. And, I'm pacing around like, when is really the right time to do something like that? And it was Easter Sunday. And so, I just, at the end of the day, I just didn't want to see it. And so I still haven't seen the crash from 1964. I mean, I can see it in my head enough, but I haven't actually been able to watch footage of it yet. And I don't know if I ever will or need to, because it does have, it's hard to look at, bottom line. That's just the bottom line. And my mom and I, she has so many binders too of pictures that I don't know if I've even seen yet. And she and I are at a really good place in our relationship now where we're going to start going through her photo
Awesome.
albums. Yeah, so we're going to get all kinds of new stuff out, and she's at a place in her life now where she doesn't. I mean, she can't go back to Indy. She just can't bring herself to do that. She said, I just can't go there if Swede's not there. And I understand that. So
I get that.
Yeah, so it's really cool that your mom's going this year. I'm so proud, and I can't wait to see you guys there, and I'm anxious to meet Eddie Jr. I'm hoping I can get him on the show at some point to chit chat with me too, and I'm sure.
Well, you're going to meet him, because like I said, so yeah, it is absolutely great that my mother has decided to go back. I've never been myself, and I started to think, a while back, just a couple of months ago, that look, man, if I'm ever going to go to the Indy 500, it's got to be this year with the 100th running.
You're right.
When you look at everything planned for this event, this is really a must-see event. So I thought, if I'm ever going to go, it's going to be this year. So I talked to my wife about it. She's busy with work. She is a director of marketing for Yamaha, so she travels a lot too. And she wanted to go, so she agreed to go. I mean, the last thing you really want to do once you get off an airplane from work is to hop back on an airplane and travel elsewhere. But she's fully supported, and she had agreed to go with me. Only because, my first option would have been my mother, but there is no way on the planet that I would have thought that she would ever want to go back there and see the race. There's just no way.
Yeah.
So we had agreed to go, and then, I don't know, on a whim one day, I just said to her, do you think I should just at least run it by my mom, and see if she wants to go? And so my wife, of course, said yeah. And I was shocked, Angela, where I asked her. It took me a while to get it out.
Yeah.
But she was straightforward. Her response was, sure, I'll go. I was blown away that she would have the strength to go back. So
God bless her.
I am just really glad that she's willing to go back there. We have a lot of things planned. As soon as people... I'm thankful for the sports, because as soon as people found out that her and I were going to be going, things have just opened up, and a lot of people are working behind the scenes to plan a whole lot of things for us to do while we're there. Similar, I think, to your Angela Goes to Indy adventure a couple years ago. I think you did quite a few things while you were there, and every day someone is contacting me that has set up something else amazing. So one of the things, definitely, as I said to you, that you, myself, and my mother have to get a picture taken while we're at Indy, and we're already going to be doing that. I've talked to Eddie Sachs's son, and we're going to take a picture as well. So we have to get all four of us together. My mom and I are going to do a track walk around the track walk. So I think what I'm going to try to do, I just thought about this, is talk to the people involved in that and get you and see if, I know Eddie is extremely busy, in the days leading up to the race, but maybe we can find that time to have that photo taken of all four of us at turn 4 on the track.
And I'd love to
how perfect would that be?
It'd be so perfect. And I'd love to do the walk around, if you would let me walk around with you and your mom.
Okay, I'll get working on that today, but I don't think it'll be a problem to get all four of us out there at turn 4. I mean, let's just blow that memory away, right? Let's make it a positive experience.
We're going to stand right in that spot and just conquer it.
That's right, with smiles on our faces.
Amen.
And then, my goal in all of this is to make sure that when my mother leaves Indy this time, she has a smile on her face. And there's a lot of people that are working behind the scenes right now, and I think they have gotten behind that effort, and they're going to do everything that they can, I'm finding out, to make sure that happens. So I think the first step is for the four of us to get out there at turn 4, and let's have smiles on our faces, and, screw you, turn 4.
Amen. Oh, screw you, turn 4. Well, you're not going to conquer us. Watch us beat that place. Well, we're out of time, Rich, so we definitely need another hour.
Already?
I know. I can't believe it. It's been an hour, so I'll have to get you back on as soon as possible. I don't even get to play your song this time. I got to wave goodbye, and I'll talk to you on the phone in just a second. Thanks for listening to Good News with Angela Savage.